In this week's session, we're going to talk about how to build grit and resilience among our graduate students, master's and doctoral. We're going to define what grit and resilience are and how they're applicable to our graduate students and to your overall graduate success. Being a thriving graduate student means that you are engaged in the learning and in the learning process, and that you have serious academic determination to reach your goals. So when we think about those two parts of the equation, being an engaged learner and being a determined learner, it's all about how you perceive your ability to actually learn. Grit and resilience are two factors that help you in making that determination. However confident you feel in your little equation about your determination and your focus, there are some risk factors that can place college and graduate students at higher risk to where you don't think that you have the skills needed to achieve your goals or to know what your goals are. Some of these risk factors could be that you're a first-generation student, so we're talking about the social capital that comes with navigating your way through a college campus. Low-income students, similarly goes back to that idea of social capital, but also you're perhaps worried about all of the other things happening in your life to where school may not be the primary or the sole focus. If you may be a student with disabilities, however, those disabilities may present themselves, that can also have an effect on how you perceive your ability to learn. And then your own mindset, and this is where grit and resilience are really grounded in, is in that mindset. Oftentimes, our mindsets, of course, are naturally shaped by the environments and the identities and the personalities that we live and exhibit. So that can sometimes also then be a risk factor for why we may not think that we are capable enough as students. So in thinking about how to best help students make that transition, so even if you know that you're totally capable and willing to do anything and everything, to maybe you're just learning how this whole thing called graduate school works, that are four major themes that we really need to address. So success mindset is one, knowing that you came to pursue your graduate degree for reasons that are familiar to you and knowing that you are here to rock it out. Academic strategies, these can be the ways that you study, learn, absorb, and produce information. Supportive relationships could be anyone from people in your immediate life to your faculty advisor to people in the hallway to even individuals in our office. So who are those supportive relationships in your life? And then meaningful involvement. Just like we always encourage undergrad students to get involved with clubs and organizations, we also kind of always expect the same out of graduate students if your time permits as well, because we want you all to be involved not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom too, so that you can build those supportive relationships, so that maybe you can learn some new strategies, so that you can see yourself in action in different environments and know that you have the success of what it takes to reach your goals. Now, historically, some individuals may say that there has been a dramatic decline, if you will, in student resiliency. Some of this may come from the monikers of helicopter parents, lawnmower parents. I think lawnmower was the most recent one. But there has been a tremendous shift in the nature of how we see resiliency and how we encourage that in children as well. And so we do still come across some wonderful examples of students who don't necessarily have to present in the way based on the element that you see on the screen, but it is becoming more and more prevalent, I think, for us to see that. So something that you can see in grad school is just the type of coursework, and the expectations are perhaps somewhat higher or perhaps more challenging than what you would have seen in your undergraduate life. So as you think about maybe how excellent you were or average you were maybe in grad school, you may be seeing and finding yourself kind of fighting more for what you want while you're in your grad program. And a part of that is to help you get a little bit more comfortable with not earning all A's, not earning all B's, maybe a healthy scattering of both of those grades. But we're also trying to foster within students that it's going to be fine. You're not always going to be brilliantly excellent in everything, and graduate school is meant to push you into an area and into a comfort zone where you know you're not necessarily going to do your best. However, it's also meant to help you learn the skills that are going to help you do your best as you progress later on. So we've talked about setbacks being a potential part, not just of your graduate school life, but even life outside of the graduate school hallways. But let's kind of refocus just for the grad school perspective for right now and think about ways that our college, the university, and of course our office can be helpful to you. And this also includes faculty, because some of the failures that you may experience could certainly be more class related, because that's where you are spending the bulk of your time. So as you think about dealing with faculty, we would want them to help you support and kind of talk through these experiences, that could be setbacks. Not all of them have to be negatives. So for example, like failing a class, but maybe let's say you didn't do really great on a particular paper or a homework assignment. We would expect to kind of in these conversations that you have with faculty to reiterate the importance of failing in the learning process. So I know the grade may mean that it's everything, but use that as an opportunity to see, okay, where are, gaps in knowledge or gaps in reading, or some opportunities that you could take to kind of help strengthen those areas where you may not be doing as best. And a part of this also then requires a bit of your own self-reflection, that gut check of, have you been doing the best that you can? Are there other things happening that at the moment prevent you from really putting the focus where it needs to be? And having that conversation again is a signal of being brave and courageous, because you're not always going to be feeling very comfortable to own up to the mistakes, because that's just not part of the culture that we live in. We're expected to know the answer at all times. So some of the most powerful things that you could do is to just be honest and upfront when you don't know something. So there are many different ways to build that resiliency. So we've talked a lot just about the class component, because that's the mind frame that I'm sure most of you all are in. But as we think about life outside of the class, this can also include building relationships with others, giving your time and your service to others, being flexible, focusing on things that you do great in and not dwelling too much on things that you don't do well in, leaning on your faith if that's a part of your life experience. And so all of these different ways can be good opportunities to build your resilience, because just because something didn't work out in this particular time and date doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way. And one of the most beneficial ways to build that mindset is to think of yourself as in that growth stage, knowing that everything about you is changeable. Nothing is set in stone. Very few things are set in stone. So being okay with that ambiguity and being able to confront those challenges, not being afraid to fail, and putting just a lot of effort to learn. Now, all of these things take time. So as we think about your other obligations, this might seem like it's, a big ask of who you are and what you do. But it's all about that continuous feedback. So you don't necessarily have to focus on the big picture right away. Think about SMART goals that we talked about way back when at the beginning in August, and break down perhaps some of these areas that you want to work on into smaller pieces that you can actively chip away through each week and each month. And a lot of these tools for teaching you can do in your own life. And if you may be a parent, these might be things you're already doing with, your own children, if you do have children. So when we think about sharing our hoorays and things that we're great in, we're sharing to ourselves and to others that, despite X, Y, and Z happening, here are some ways that I've had some successes, be it personal or scholastic. Effort is the more important element here. It's not always about sticking the landing, but it's learning how to stick that landing through small, quantifiable elements, and then learning from those mistakes, rather than crumpling that paper that your faculty gives back to you with, a lot of feedback and just saying, I suck at this. Put it in your book bag and reflect on it as you drive back, and then read it, at a time when maybe you're not quite as charged. I think that's one of the things that I regret the most in my first master's program, of just being too stubborn to actually look at the feedback, and thinking that it was an indictment on my, my intelligence and my reason for being in this program, and, how dare I make these mistakes. But those comments and those feedback are there to kind of help train you, to help you start thinking in the way that they think about some of the areas of your literature and of just your professional field. So if resilience is just this overall theme of learning how to, take the lumps and deal with them as best you can, then grit is kind of the oil in between, because it's what you tell yourself on a daily basis, or at least on a regular basis, that you are able and capable of doing this level of work, and that challenges are definitely inevitable for future success, and that you are here for a reason, to meet your goals and your values, and that you could certainly do this. So fostering grit can take a lot of different forms. So again, this is very school-based, but it could also be family-based, I guess, for those of you who might be teaching this to. your own children. But set the expectations, teach the vocabulary, meaning of what does this look like in our context. There should be frustrating experiences. Don't swoop down and immediately help. Monitor the experience. So again, we're going back into that reflective period and that gut check, what worked, what decisions could you have made differently? And then pivot once you have some of those reflections to make a different choice than later on. So one way to think about the grit aspect in a resilience is just to kind of reflect to yourself of what is something that you were really good at doing, and think about how you first learned it. I tried knitting 3 times before it finally came to me. And all 3 times I would get super frustrated. I would throw the needles and the yarn in the back of my closet and then forget about it for 2-3 years. But when I finally came around to it, it was over a holiday break, so I had the time. I came back with a vengeance and I said, I won't let this conquer me. And then I sat for about 2 hours with my mom over my shoulder, like looking at my hands and how I'm holding the yarn and the needles and what I'm doing. And then from there, I went down the rabbit hole of YouTube, like you do, to look at other people and their different tips and tricks. And so that really helped me get, let's say, moderately better with knitting. But despite the repeated attempts of quitting, I came back to it because it was something that I wanted to learn, because it was something that, my mom had done for many, many years, and I have a lot of homemade scarves to prove it. And so I really wanted to bring that into my skill set. So your example doesn't necessarily have to be quite as mundane as this one. So it could be something that was a little bit more serious, for sure. But think about, how did you get around to doing it? Break it down and have that reflective component. What helped you get better at it? Was it other supportive individuals? Was it just you and your own tenacity? Was it people on YouTube or other social media? And kind of what motivated you to continue to get better? So thinking about mindfulness and grit, this is always going to be a lifelong endeavor depending on just what's happening. Again, I can't stress that enough. When we think about teaching resilience and grit, it's about creating that environment, and it's about creating sort of controlled frustration over it. Sometimes things are definitely not in our control, and there may not be a whole lot we can do there. But for things that are, think about creating that environment and then breaking it down into skills and habits and strategies that can help you overcome that. And if you may be a teacher or teaching others in whatever capacity that may be, this is a good opportunity then for you as well. There is a level of sacrifice that grit requires, and this goes back to things like, discipline and time management. You are going to have to renegotiate some of the wants and needs to overcome some particular obstacle as we think about this. So it's not always going to be a very easily done thing. And if you're already having this conversation and you're already thinking about this, then that means you're already given it some thought. You may not have known that there's a whole branch of research behind grit and resilience, but that just demonstrates the fact that we all naturally kind of lean in towards this kind of thinking, just that we don't always necessarily label it for what it is. So let us know about some other times of how you would define grit and resilience. Maybe when was the first time you actually heard these terms? And how did you go about @maybe being more intentional about incorporating this into your daily practice? We'd love to hear from you, so drop us a line at cehdgss@louisville.edu.